Okay, we'll just wait for YouTube to catch up. Welcome back, History Seekers, to another episode of Fistory. I would like to wish everyone a happy Black History Month. And in that vein, we will be discussing the Black Death in England. For while the English Isles was riven by the scourge of the Black Death, there was another scourge lurking underneath, even more pernicious, for it was ignored. Yes, I am talking about racism and white supremacy. Even back in the 14th century, there was still racismus among the population of England, probably even more so because there were so many white people around. Fortunately, of course, this oversight has been corrected in the modern world. Now, actual contemporary accounts of the Black Death in England from the 14th century are a bit thin on the ground, weirdly enough. I went searching for these, and by far the sort of best personal account, as opposed to just sort of historical records, where some guys like, oh yes, in this year there be a furious pestilence, what did do off with many of the common folk and nobility and all of that, right, is actually from the Bishop of Rochester, and I will be reading some of that. However, in 2023, if you can freaking believe this, during the COVID, sort of race lockdowns, basically, there came out this article that was based on a paper from the Museum of London, a once august institution that has sadly fallen to race communism, that decided to reframe the question of the Black Death through the lens of racism, most notably its effects on Black women. How did they come to this startling conclusion? Well, they went to a plague grave in near the Royal Mint, which contained 49 bodies. And then they literally measured their skulls. And the best part of this whole paper is that they had to do skull measurements to figure out which were Black, right? And specifically Black women. And then later they have to do a whole section on how, despite the fact that they did this does not mean that biology has anything to do with race. Sort of really threading the needle on that one. Not only that, I mean, out of a population of 49, so then they compared it to like another grave that was allegedly from the same period that was not plague victims, that had like 94 people in it. And then they drew the conclusion from that Black women were much more likely to die from the plague in London in 1348. So, I mean, there's so many things wrong with this, like just so many things wrong with this. And I just want to preface this episode with a point about history generally. Okay, so I have a rule. I guess you could call it Fisty's law or something like that, if that tickles your fancy. I presume someone else must have come up with this rule or this law, but I don't know it, so I'm claiming it because that's how this thing works, right? So in my mind, when I am looking at history, particularly history that is referenced in modern times, my general rule of thumb is the more current political utility that is being gained from any piece of history, the more closely it should be questioned, because it is much more likely that that history has been altered to fit a current day political narrative. You can see this very, very clearly with slavery. You can see it with Mustache Man and World War II. Because of the way that politics works, because politics is a narrative, and because every narrative requires like a beginning, a middle, and an end, because humans are narrative-based creatures. History tends to occupy an important place in politics as a reason for why we do things, or why we don't do certain things. World War II is an excellent example of this, of course. World War II is, why we don't do nationalism anymore. It's why you can't have your own country anymore because of World War II, don't you know, right? And so then you have the past, then you have the present version of history, which is usually sort of comprised as like, oh, and isn't everything going great because we learned from the lessons of the past, despite the fact that quite clearly humans do not learn from the lessons of the past and they keep doing the same mistakes over and over again. If you want a very, very good example of this, just look at communism, right? Which just gets infinite redos. Every single time it loses a life, it just hibernates for like 10, 20 years. And then someone pops up and starts saying to the younger generation, hey, have you heard of this great guy, Karl Marx? Did you know his ideas have never been tried? And that is the reason, why you are dissatisfied with life. Now, I realize that from the point of view of, how can I put this? The COVID enthusiasts, the vaccine enjoyers, this could be an argument for saying, well, look at the Black Death, look at the Spanish flu. This is why we need highly untested vaccines developed at breakneck pace, forced upon people through political coercion, don't you know, right? We can't just like leave it up to people to make their own choices. The results could be catastrophic. And I am pretty sure that, I think I've said this before, that in the back of the mind of every sort of pandemic scientist, every microbiologist, there lurks this sort of back brain fear of events such as the Black Death, the Spanish flu, and this is sort of the reason why they believe that these catastrophes can be altered and erased through science. Now, I kind of not really sure whether I agree about this. There is certainly evidence to suggest that in some ways it was true, right? I mean, look at the advent of antibiotics, right? They have been an incredible boon to human life. Literally only 100 years, less than 100 years old. I think last week we were talking about the first antibiotic that was effective against bubonic plague was only developed in 1943. 1943. It hasn't even been 100 years since we developed antibiotics. Truly, the boomers lived in what is essentially like the golden age of golden ages, if you think about it, right? Everybody else had to sort of like live with rules and laws that were designed, at least in part, to mitigate the transference of highly infectious diseases. People have specified that this is what is behind like a lot of dietary laws, notably sort of the Hebrew dietary laws, don't eat pork, don't eat shellfish, all this kind of other stuff before refrigeration. But modern technology has sort of allowed us to get away with a lot of these laws about diet, sexuality, child rearing, all this kind of stuff, right? Technology will fix everything, and then we no longer have to follow the commands of God. What could possibly go wrong? You say, well, everything. Don't worry. As everything goes wrong, we will have more technology to deal with all the things that go wrong, and it's going great. I don't know how to feel about this dichotomy personally. I'm not the kind of person to say, oh, well, that means really what we need to do is, get rid of all technology and, go back to like, scrabbling in the mud and stuff like that. I don't want to do that. At the same time, obviously, it seems that using technology to obliterate or disobey fundamental rules, customs, and laws that have been in place for centuries seems like a bad idea. But how do you split the difference? How do you thread the needle? Exactly. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, But remember, Fisty's law. The more political utility being gained from any historical event in the present, the more closely that historical event should be questioned, for the more likely it is that that historical event is being massaged for a political agenda. And this is generally how I look at any piece of history now that is used in the modern day. So, first, we will read a couple of excerpts of the plague spreading to England in 1358, 1359. And then we will go on to examine the unseen horror that lies beneath the Black Death, not the deaths of all of the white people, obviously, who cares about them, right? But the unspoken assumptions of racism, particularly against black women, of which I am assured there were many in London in 1348, 1350, around that period, right? Like, middle of the 14th century, okay, right? So, this again is from Catherine Horrocks' excellent book, The Black Death, which is really the only book that I could find that brings together all of the first-hand accounts of the plague in Europe. Excellent book. You can get it on Anna's Archive if you want. The plague spreads to London. This account comes from the Chronicle of Robert of Avesbury, a secular clerk based in London and employed in the court of the Archbishop of Canterbury at Lambeth. His chronicle is primarily concerned with the military campaigns of Edward III, and he has relatively little to say about the plague, but his account of the arrival of the flagellants in London has the immediacy of an eyewitness account. Avesbury died at the beginning of 1359. The pestilence, which first began in the land inhabited by the Saracens, grew so strong that, sparing no lordship, it visited every place in all the kingdoms stretching from that land northwards up to and including Scotland, striking down the greater part of the people with the blows of sudden death. It began in England in the county of Dorset, about the feast of St. Peter's in Chains on the 1st of August, and immediately progressed without warning from place to place. It killed a great many healthy people, removing them from human concerns in the course of a morning. Those marked for death were scarcely permitted to live longer than 3 or 4 days. It showed favor to no one, except for a very few of the wealthy. On the same day, 20, 40, or 60 bodies, and on many occasions many more, might be committed for burial together in the same pit. The pestilence arrived in London at about the Feast of All Saints, and daily deprived many of life. It grew so powerful that between Candlemas, 2nd of February, and Easter, the 12th of April, more than 200 corpses were buried almost every day in the new burial ground made next to Smithfield, and this was in addition to the bodies buried in other churchyards in the city. It ceased in London with the coming of the grace of the Holy Spirit, that is to say at Pentecost on the 31st of May, proceeding uninterrupted towards the north, where it also stopped about Michaelmas, 29th of September, 1349. So, as you can see, this is like a relatively brief account. And see, these are just, they're very, very brief. So a much better personal account is from the Bishop of Rochester. I tried to say Sapiente, what was the size of the population in London in the 14th century? I believe it was between 60 and 80,000. I was actually asking Grok about this. Was it 60 to 80,000? I think so. It was a lot smaller than it was today. London's pre-plague population is estimated at around 60,000 to 80,000 people, according to Grok. But again, Grok is using some modern scholarship there, so I don't know. This is one of the big problems, of course, with LLMs. Since they were made after the woke era, they have also imbibed a hell of a lot of woke academia, which is not going to be good. Mikey Bikey believes that it was between 80,000 up to 100,000, according to Brave. So I guess no one really knows. Anywhere between 60 to 100,000, a lot smaller. So this is the contemporary account of the Bishop of Rochester, taken from the Historia Rofensis, the Chronicle of the Cathedral Priory of Rochester, which covers the period 1314 to 1350. Now, I tried to find this at the British Library, but it's now gone. You can't access it on the internet. Probably, it was removed for racism or something. I don't know, right? So thank you, Ms. Horrocks, for this transcription. 1348. A great mortality of men began in India and raging throughout the whole of infidel Syria and Egypt. Oh, I like how they just call it infidel Syria. That's awesome. And also through Greece, Italy, Provence, and France arrived in England, where the same mortality destroyed more than a third of the men, women, and children. As a result, there was such a shortage of servants, craftsmen, and workmen, and of agricultural workers and laborers, that a great many lords and people, although well endowed with goods and possessions, were yet without all service and attendance. Alas, this mortality devoured such a multitude of both sexes that no one could be found to carry the bodies of the dead to burial, but men and women carried the bodies of their own little ones to church on their shoulders and threw them into mass graves, from which arose such a stink that it was barely possible for anyone to go past a churchyard. Yes, nowadays, of course, we call that Birmingham. Sorry, I shouldn't make jokes. As remarked above, such a shortage of workers ensured that the humble turned up their noses at employment and could scarcely be persuaded to serve the eminent unless for triple wages. Oh no. Instead, because of the doles handed out at funerals, those who once had to work now began to have time for idleness, thieving, and other outrages. And thus the poor and servile have been enriched and the rich impoverished. I wonder what Marx would have said about this. He'd probably be like, Karl Marx, why the Black Death was the best thing that ever happened in England. As a result, churchmen, knights, and other worthies have been forced to thresh their corn, plough the land, and perform every other unskilled task if they were to make their own bread. From his modest household, the Bishop of Rochester, Hamohethe, lost 4 priests, 5 squires, 10 household servants, 7 young clerks, and 6 pages, leaving no one in any office who should have served him. At Mulling, he appointed 2 abbesses who promptly died. No one remained alive there except 4 professed nuns and 4 novices, and the bishop committed custody of the temporalities to one of them and the spiritualities to the other, since no adequate person could be found to fill the post of abbess. So this is an old idea that there are 2 realms. There is the realm of the temporal, stuff that goes on in life, and the realm of the spiritual. And though both need to be seen to, they are distinct and separate realms. So you have, for example, the phrase, the Lord's spiritual and the Lord's temporal, right? This want was strongly felt both in Kent and throughout the whole of England among the clergy and the people, religious and others alike. Because of it, the prelates and leading men of the kingdom appeared before the king and asked for some remedy to be ordained for these problems. Therefore, by the council of the prelates and leading men of the whole of England, they ordained remedy for these things in the following manner. The ordinance of labour as follows. After the death of the Archbishop of Canterbury, John Stratford, the Pope, acting on the request of the king, gave the archbishopric to the Chancellor of England, Master John Offord, an infirm and paralysed man. Offord borrowed a great sum of money from all sides to give to the Pope, but he might as well not have bothered, for he died soon afterwards and thereby lost the lot. He died on Ascension Day, 21st of May, and was buried without ceremony in the Church of Canterbury, elected to the see, but not yet consecrated. Thus, he was the ruin of a great many creditors who were reduced to poverty. Damn. Imagine lending money in the time of the plague. You sure you're going to pay it back? Yeah, as long as I don't die of the plague or anything. Mate, interest rates must have been insane. For in these days, juicy benefices come expensive. I wonder what that means. Juicy benefices. I don't know if that means like offices. Benefices. Juicy benefices come expensive. And as a result, their buyers can scarcely recover the cost, but languish in poverty during their whole time in office. Yeah, it means offices, right? So you pay for offices. This was a big criticism of the Catholic Church during the Reformation. By the way, the buying of offices, it was essentially endemic and was regarded as simony. Thus, in our day, we see many holders of benefices existing in permanently straitened circumstances. The Dominican, Brother Thomas of London, the Bishop of Ely, was one example, and there are numberless others. But in spite of such great poverty, buyers can always be found, to the confusion and destruction of the church. This time, the Canterbury chapter chose for a second time Master Thomas Bradwardine of Cowden, a native of the Diocese of Rochester, who had also been their choice immediately after the death of Archbishop Stratford. And on that occasion, the Pope gave Master Thomas the archbishopric in the usual way before Offord could reach him, choosing rather to have thanks than insisting on his right to make the appointment. But after his collation, the king wrote on Offord's behalf and hindered the proceedings in other ways. Sad to relate, the archbishopric has been so damaged by the number of vacancies as a result of bad custody and the payments made at the Roman Curia that there seems no hope of its recovering in our days. Since the time of St. Thomas a Becket, the Church of Canterbury has never been as impoverished and so damaged by unaccustomed burdens as it is now. Okay, so there's more stuff about the doings of the church. The shortage of laborers and of workers in every kind of craft and occupation was then so acute that more than a third of the land throughout the whole kingdom remained uncultivated. Laborers and skilled workers became so rebellious that neither the king nor the law and the judges who enforced it were able to correct them, and more or less the whole population turned to evil courses, became addicted to all forms of vice, and stooped to more than usually base behavior, thinking not at all of death or of the recently experienced plague, nor of how they were hazarding their own salvation by uniting in rebellion. And priests, making light of the sacrifice of a contrite spirit, took themselves to where they might receive a stipend greater than the value of their benefices. As a result, many benefices remained unserved by parish priests, whom neither prelates nor ordinaries were powerful enough to bridle. Thus, spiritual dangers sprouted daily among the clergy and the laity. At that time, the king spent Christmas at Orsett, a manor of the Bishop of London. So yes, there's at that time there was such a shortage of fish that men were obliged to eat flesh on Wednesdays, and it was ordered in England that 4 herring should sell for a penny. In Lent, indeed, there was such a lack of fish that many people who had just been accustomed to live daintily had to make do with just pastry, bread, and pottage. But the threshers, labourers, and workmen were so well supplied with cash that they did not need worry about paying the full price for such foods, and thus, by an inversion of the natural order, those who were accustomed to have plenty and those accustomed to suffer want fell into need on the one hand and into abundance on the other. That's really fascinating. Oh, we got a Ko-Fi. Oh, wait, okay. Do I even have Ko-Fi loaded? Actually, I don't have Ko-Fi loaded. Thank you very, very much, Sadie's. Let's have a look at Ko-Fi. Yes, you too can donate to the channel if you wish, via Entropy or Ko-Fi. From Years for $5. Thank you very much, Years. Lol at the racial angle. Should have been called the White Death since it killed 6 guerrillian Europeans. Thank you very much, Years. I will take that under advisement and submit that to the Museum of London. I feel like they'd be into that. So just that's so. So the reason I wanted to read this is that there is no historical event tragic enough, no loss of life huge enough that the race communists will not repurpose it for their own ends. I mean, obviously, right? So let's get into let's get into this. I was researching the plague in London, obviously, and came across this. And I remember when this came out because I was doing the news at the time. And this was, sort of peak woke, essentially, during the quarantine race war, when all of the historical institutions were being purged and undermined. It still hasn't been reversed, but now that everybody really, really dislikes it, they're sort of like laying low and just sort of being more quiet about it. But if you go to any museum in London now, you will see woke garbage everywhere. It's horrible. Racism in medieval England may have led to black people dying of bubonic plague. See now, what you would have thought that they would have suddenly discovered some biological mechanism by which racism makes you more susceptible to the plague, right? Perhaps it is the stress of being black in a white world, right? The emotional labor of having to cope with all these crackers being around you, shit, you heard? That makes you more susceptible to the plague. What are they going to say? I'm on tenterhooks. chat. Racism in medieval England may right, see, right there, may have contributed to black people dying of bubonic plague. Oh, yes, there must have been so many blacks in London at the time. Researchers employing black feminist archaeology. This is a real article from the Daily Telegraph, right? Oh my fucking, I've got one from the BBC as well, right? Like, this is not the only one. Researchers employing black feminist archaeology have studied remains in 14th century plague cemeteries in London. The study has claimed that black people may have succumbed to the plague in disproportionate numbers compared to whites because of structural racism in medieval England. Right. It concludes that critical race theory, an academic field devoted to examining how Western institutional power upholds racism, should be used by archaeologists in future. Research conducted by Dr. Rebecca Redfern of the Museum of London, she's black, obviously, also suggests that misogynoir, prejudice against black women created a particular risk of death by plague. The study suggests that findings show structural racism's devastating effects at work in 14th century England when the plague bacteria Yersinia pestis caused mass death. Dr. Redfern studied 145 sets of human remains interned in plague cemeteries when the Black Death swept through London and killed about 35,000 people. Of those buried, 49 succumbed to plague and 96 to other causes. They only know this because it was a plague pit, right? It's not like they can get DNA like this far out, right? Like this is what, 700 years we're like talking? 700, roughly 700 years, right? There's no DNA, right? So what did they do? Well, they measured the skulls. I was of the impression that we don't do that now, right? Because measuring skulls be mustache man. No. Look, it turns out when you're a black race archaeologist, measuring skulls is absolutely fine. Oh my God. Wait, we got an entropy. Let me see. Mikey Bikey for $3. Please make the gay race communism stop. It will never stop, you heard? Shit. Brothers be all up in this communism now. Black Lenin be coming for you all. Thank you very, very much, Mikey Bikey. Appreciate that. Just love how they just like measured skulls, right? By measuring skull features, Dr. Redfern and her colleagues claim to have established that there were 9 people of black African ancestry among the plague dead and 8 among the others. So we are expected to believe that of the 49 people in that plague pit, 9 of them were black. Okay. Oh my God, we got another super chat. Aaron C. for $50. Holy crap. Thank you, Aaron. This Aaron from Clowntown Chronicle. Oh, you should check it out. I just cut another episode with him actually the other day. For $50, you thought doing a history show would spare you from the clown world, but clown world is retroactive and forever. I'm sorry. That's okay, man. That's okay. I've made peace with the clown within, right? It's a black female clown, and she's very, very angry and just never smiles, and is always like berating me for stuff. But there's nothing I can do, because if I said anything, it'd be racist, isn't it? So Dr. Redfern's research paper, published in Bioarchaeology International and focusing on, quote, anti-black structural racism, claimed that the purported black population in London suffered disproportionately more deaths during the plague, which struck in 1348. The paper cites studies that show that death by plague was more likely for those with underlying nutritional or health problems, perhaps caused by poverty or other stresses, and concludes that the black population of medieval London may have suffered the health outcomes of structural and anti-black racism. So let me get this straight, right? There were blacks in London in 1349, 700 years ago, right? And they still haven't like risen to the same position as their white peers, and this is because of social and economic circumstances, right? You would think, right, over I don't know, 700 years. I mean, unless I guess the Black Death killed all the blacks in London off because, Black Death be racist and shit. Um, is there something perhaps like more going on? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not I'm not a noted race scientist, unlike Dr. Redfern. But I feel like maybe we should have seen some improvement after 700 fucking years. Yeah, yeah, maybe I mean, white people do be racist and all shit. Um, the paper models the number of females of African descent in the graves and concludes they had health outcomes that were worse still amid a pestilence that killed a third of the population of Europe. Why do you assume that the blacks in London at the time were like poor and marginalized, right? I mean, they could have been like nobles and lords. I mean, shit, I saw that thing on the BBC where like one of the British monarchs was like black and in a wheelchair, right? Like the BBC obviously like wouldn't lie to me. So, speaking of which, actually, so the BBC underwent a review recently about their portrayal of race on television, right? Because their viewership is like absolutely tanking because everybody hates them now, right? And one of the reasons that everybody hates them is because they keep putting black people in period historical dramas where they have absolutely like no right to be there. Okay, right? So that thing about how they did a historical drama and there was like a king of England and he's black and in a wheelchair is like a real thing. They do this all the time. And what they discovered was that it wasn't just the whites that hated this, it was also the blacks because, right, like, everyone just sees that it's ridiculous, right? And so the BBC was encouraged by this review to, be more careful and sensitive in their use of diversity, particularly in historical period pieces. But the justification for why was, check this, if they portray black people as being rich and successful in past period dramas, it may put across the conception that there are no barriers to them succeeding. So even when they're doing this, they have to find like a race communism like way to express this this sort of thing, right? Oh my god. Okay, so speaking of the BBC, we've got this BBC article as well. This is even more funny. On a party, how dare you? I'll have you know that Shakespeare was a known black man. That's right, Shakespeare. We used to call him Shaky. Down on the block. Hey, what up, Shaky? To neg or not to neg? That be the question, fool. Anyway, so this is the BBC article about the same thing. Again, 21st of November, 2023. Black women most likely to die in medieval plague, Museum of London says. The Museum of London used to be a respectable institution, right? Like ask Cedes, right? Like it is terrible what has happened to the Museum of London, right? It is just full of woke garbage now. It's bloody awful. Black women of African descent, land back brothers, were more likely to die of the medieval plague in London, academics at the Museum of London have found. The study is the first, it's a first, archaeological exploration of race, gender, and social standing influencing a person's risk of death during what was known as the Great Pestilence or Great Mortality. That is a lie. It only deals with race. I mean, it focuses on black women, so technically gender, but it's not like there's any larger study of deaths and sort of economic circumstances among the white population. Obviously, right? We're doing race communism now. The research is based on 145 individuals from 3 cemeteries. Truly a massive sample size. Man, 145 people from 3 different cemeteries. Wow, you can sure tell a lot, right? The outbreak is believed to have claimed the lives of 35,000 Londoners. Okay, I mean, couldn't you find more bones? Oh wait, because they got rid of a lot of the plague pits because they're freaking dangerous, right? Whatever. The report, which has been peer-reviewed, which tells you a lot about how bad peer review is now, is called Race, Population Affinity, and Mortality Risk During the Second Plague Pandemic in 14th Century London, England. Although what they really should have called it was Plague Be Racist, y'all, especially against our black sisters, you heard. I believe that was the working title. So yeah, so this is, advanced copy of the paper was given to BBC because race communism, obviously, right? Data on bone and dental changes of the 145 individuals from East Smithfield Emergency Plague Cemetery, St Mary's Graces, and St Mary's Spittal formed the basis of the study. The primary data was then examined by applying a forensic anthropological toolkit to estimate whether the bones were likely to have come from someone with African heritage. Okay, so they measured their skulls, but clearly they couldn't do it sort of with too much accuracy because otherwise they'd be mustache man. Oh, and this is great. The report also acknowledges the sample size is small and that it has been careful to avoid what it termed as, quote, the incorrect and harmful implication that there is a biological basis of race. Then, how did you measure the skulls? Right? there's no biological basis for race, right? But we got all these like skeletons from 700 years ago, and we reckon we can tell which ones are black. Did they like just sacrifice a chicken over them or something and like do some voodoo shit, right? And be like, I feel that this skeleton was from a strong black sister, bent under the struggle of living in a white London. Oh God. Honestly, this is just the worst kind of like. I mean, this is basically race Lysenkoism. Okay, this is Lysenko tier stuff. If these kinds of people were put in charge of like a country's farm production, right? They come around and basically say that like you I don't know, the crops won't grow unless they're blessed by black people in the middle of winter or some fucking like crazy bullshit like that, right? Yes, the incorrect and harmful implication that there is a biological basis of race, and we actively oppose the incorrect inference that there is something inherent to people assigned to a certain racial category that makes them more vulnerable to disease. You see it, Lysen Kwanda. Thank you very much, Ears. I like that one. So then how does this paper make any sense? Right? Like, so race isn't biological, race is like a construct, but we like, I don't know. Oh my God, this is, dude. It goes on to state, instead, we emphasize here that variation by race in susceptibility to and hazard of dying from diseases reflects the biological and psychosocial effects of racism, which was present in the medieval world. Race is a social classification and is not based in biological reality, but it does have biological consequences, like allowing your skeleton to be identified 700 years later by some crazy race scientist, race communist who works for the British Museum. You know, this is just, dude, come on. This is so freaking mental. It found that there were a significantly higher proportions of people of color and those of black African descent in plague burials compared to non-plague burials. Out of a sample of 47 plague burials. Like, oh, dude, this is so freaking diluted. I can't even, bro. The report said there is a significantly higher proportion of people of estimated. I love how they're constantly hedging their bets here, right? Estimated African affiliation in the plague burials compared to the non-plague burials, 18.4 versus 8.3. So there's 49 people in the plague pit, and they reckon 20%, 18.4, let's say 20% of them are black. So let's see, well, 10% of 20%. So there's like 10 black people in that grave. Well, how many of them are black women? Right? Like, is it 50-50? I'm so curious, bros. I can't wait to find out, right? And there are only 8.3 black people, percent of black people in the non-plague cemetery. Okay. For the female only sample, individuals of estimated African population affinity Estimated African population affinity. Okay, so do you measure the noses? Like honestly, like what the? Oh mate, oh god, I would love to have like dinner with this like crazy like race communist and just be like, so how exactly did you determine? Oh, we use an anthropological toolkit. Okay. Have a significantly higher estimated hazard of dying of plague compared to those with an estimated white European affinity. There are no significant associations for any of the other comparisons. The likelihood of dying from the Great Pestilence was the highest among those who already faced significant hardship, excluding exposure to famines that hit England during this time. So most of the population, these famines were brutal, right? Oh, no, they only affected the poor. No, they freaking didn't. I remember reading something about these famines were brutal, absolutely brutal. The research concluded that higher death rates amongst people of color and those of black African descent was a result of the devastating effects of pre-modern structural racism in the medieval world. Fucking hell, man. And BBC does a little explainer here. Social and religious divisions based on origin, skin color, and appearance were present in both medieval England and Europe. Yes, well, of course they were. People were normal back then. The paper said that from 1336 to 1584, nearly 18,000 foreigners had come to London from India, Greece, Iceland, and mainland Europe. So not from Africa then. Chad, I am starting to think that this scholarship by Ms. Redfern is less than rigorous. Obviously, as a white man, I should sit down when a black woman is speaking, doubly so that it is Black History Month. But I am beginning to suspect that this is not really the most rigorous scholarship, and that perhaps in an attempt to boost diversity quotas, the Museum of London just gave this woman a sinecure. While no population figures for black women in London have been recorded, the paper added during this period mercantile and richer migrants who regularly stayed in London, accompanied by entire households, often had servants who were free or enslaved peoples originating from sub-Saharan and northern Africa or Eastern Europe. Wait, they had free servants? That doesn't sound likely. I was reliably informed that every single person that was hanging around anyone white through that entire period was obviously a slave, right? The research team added people of color were established in the UK thousands of years ago, and this was reflected in literature and other sources. Okay, I am going to doubt you here under Fisty's law, right? You see what I'm getting at here, right? This is a law that you too can use in your everyday life. Biological anthropologist from University of Colorado, Professor Sharon DeWitter, I bet she's black, said, not only does this research add to our knowledge about the biosocial effects that affected risks of mortality during medieval plague pandemics, it also shows that there is a deep history of social marginalization shaping health and vulnerability to disease in human populations. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so okay, so this is from the author herself. Dr. Rebecca Redfern, she's black, from the Museum of London, said, we have no primary written sources from people of color and those of black African descent during the Great Pestilence of the 14th century. So archaeological research is essential to understanding more about their lives and experience, right? So obviously they were there, right? Like we wish them to be there, but there's no actual contemporary sources saying that they were there. So we have to do some like voodoo to dig up this narrative, right? And push it further and further back. We've always been a diverse nation, don't you know? A nation of immigrants, all that kind of shit. Oh, and of course, because this is 2023, as with the recent COVID-19 pandemic, social and economic environment played a significant role in people's health. And this is most likely why we find more people of color and those of black African descent in plague burials. So this is the article from the London Museum. I think this is literally exactly the same thing that was on the BBC. Gee, who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk it? Amazing. Almost like they operate hand in glove. This is the the article in question. Bioarchaeology International. Oh, this looks like a very, very well received journal. Oh my god. Imagine imagine freaking like publishing like tat like this. Abstract, we investigate whether hazards of death from plague and physiological stress at a 14th century plague cemetery, the Royal Mint in London, differed between populations using 49 adults whose affiliation was established using macromorphic traits. They measured their skulls. Compared to a non-plague cemetery with 96 people, there was a greater proportion of people of estimated African affiliation in the plague burials. Cox proportional hazards analysis revealed higher hazards of death from plague for those with estimated African affiliation. There were higher rates of linear enamel hypoplasia. I don't know, does that mean they had bad teeth? In those with estimated African affiliation, but this finding is not statistically significant. These results provide the first evidence that hazards of plague death were higher for people of estimated African affiliation compared to other affiliations, possibly because of existing inequalities, in addition to migration outcomes. Okay? These findings may reflect a pre-modern structural racism's devastating effects. Oh, for fuck's sake. Honestly. So yeah, this is the actual page. I looked it up. The second plague pandemic's first outbreak in the mid-14th century AD, commonly referred to as the Black Death, killed many millions of people across Eurasia and Africa, and was one of the most did it though? It's not like there's any records from Africa at the time, right? You can't like look up the please give me first-hand African accounts of the Black Death. There might be some from Northern Africa. Because of the presence of Christianity in sort of like the Mediterranean, but there's going to be nothing from sub-Saharan Africa because they didn't freaking write anything. Oh god! But if they could, right, they would have said how it was all the fault of the white man, right? Clearly, and was one of the most catastrophic disease events the world has ever experienced. But have you considered how it affected Black people? The second plague pandemic continued in the form of outbreaks and isolated cases of plagues for centuries afterwards. Yersinia pestis, extensive land and sea trade networks promoted the spread of the initial wave. Some modeling suggests the disease traveled between 1.5 and 6 kilometers a day. See, this is why people are suspicious of the idea, particularly that this one was all Yersinia pestis, right? And unless it was like some mutant form that doesn't exist anymore, right? I don't know, right? But that is very, very fast for a virus to travel per day. Through dramatic population, the 14th century plague also wrought significant political and economic changes across Europe. Horrocks, 1994. Ha ha! So she is referencing the book that I am reading to you from. See, that's what you get on this channel. You get a university class education. Someone can come up to you and be like, well, did you get a master's in history? And be like, no, I did listen to this pretty awesome podcast. So, I mean, Mikey Bikey, hyperplasia is underdevelopment or incomplete development of a tissue or organ. Okay, right. So yes. So it seems like Horrocks is basically sort of the go-to text for everyone like studying this. And now I bring it to you. Enjoy. And of course the important thing. And it resulted in many violent acts against minority groups, including racial religious cleansing of Jewish communities. Oh, I see. You don't hear much about the Black community though, right? I mean, it's not like it says in any of the accounts, the population rose up against the Moors because they were suspicious that they might be poisoning the wells or anything. There's nothing about them at all. But they're a minority. We're in a minority. We're trying to get like a narrative going in the modern times. So, The pandemic led to increased tensions between different communities, status groups, and religions, although these detrimental divisions and structural inequalities, i.e., racism. So this is the, I mean, you've probably already heard, I'm sure you've heard this to death over the last few years, but this is the critical race theory description of racism. Anything that is not the ideal sort of state of race communism, where everyone except whites, obviously, equal economically speaking, is racism. So structural inequalities, i.e. racism, already existed and had been rising for many years, in part due to the Little Ice Ages, successive waves of famine, and climactic instability. I mean, I would request a source from this. I know there are sources cited. Anyone got that, man? Source, brother? It came to me in a dream, right? Wait, hang on. What is she citing? Fagan, 2001. The Little Ice Age, How Climate Made History. Okay. Hahn, also 2001. The Difference the Middle Ages Makes. Color and Race Before the Modern World, Journal of Medieval and Early Modern Studies. Oh, I'm sure this is a gripping read. So this is the problem, gentle viewers. You really can't trust any science after I don't know, 1990. Particularly when it's to do with this kind of stuff, because they just, the commies just got in and they just started like altering all of this like crazy stuff, right? Consequently, the pandemic affected countries whose populations were already compromised, as evidenced by the study of medieval human remains across Europe. Despite some medieval primary sources suggesting that the first wave of the second plague pandemic killed almost everyone it infected, bioarchaeological research has provided evidence that, at least in some contexts, it was not an indiscriminate killer. Excuse me? It was not an indiscriminate killer. Just read Horrocks. All of the first-hand accounts describe that it was an indiscriminate killer. That is the thing that leaps out of you most of all. The indiscriminate nature of how it killed. Rich or poor, man or woman, religious, pious and non-religious. Everybody was felled in its wake. Somebody needs a slap, right? Honestly, my God. For example, in London, individuals with evidence of physiological stresses experienced prior to the epidemic, including those associated with developmental disruption during childhood, were more likely to die during the plague outbreak compared to age peers without evidence of such previous exposure to stress. Okay, right? So people who were unhealthy were more likely to die from the plague. Racism causes stress. Stress makes you unhealthy. Therefore, racism was to blame, right? I mean, Mikey Bikey, if it only killed tall people, it'd be called the tall death. well, quite, Mikey Bikey, quite. Oh my God. Analysis of individuals who died in the plague in the latter half of the 14th century. It killed estimated 10 to 30% of the English population, indicates a relatively high hazard of dying for individuals who were frail because of previous exposure to physiological stresses and those who were nutritionally compromised. Again, goddamn rich people fucking you over. We need a heckin' wholesome race communism, bro, in order to make sure that this never happens again. Bioarchaeological research has not yielded evidence of sex difference in plague mortality. Oh, mate, feminists must be so disappointed. However, evidence from historical documents does indicate a sex-selective effects, i.e. higher numbers of female deaths compared to non-plague years during plague outbreaks up to 1450 in the Netherlands. Okay, so they're really, reaching here, right? We got to get the feminists on board somehow. Historical documents also yield evidence that mortality was worse for poorer people than for the wealthy in some contexts. Okay, would you care to list what those contexts are? No. You can read Afani and Bonetti, Cummins et al., De Vita and Kowalski. In this way, the documentary evidence reveals how gender and class categories, structural inequality, compound harm in populations. Research on pre-modern pandemic in sub-Saharan Africa has also revealed a substantial effect on populations and communities, especially in late medieval West Africa. I would be curious to see how they know any of this, to be perfectly frank, right? There is thus existing evidence that medieval plague mortality risks varied among both biopolitical and socio-cultural dimensions. Well. Who's using the big words now, Ms. Redfern? However, to date, no bioarchaeological research has addressed the potential effects of structural racism, despite primary source evidence showing that Northern Europe had a diverse and racialized population during this period. Note that all the sources for this claim are like 2018, 2007, 2014. This is what I mean about, like, when, political things come along and they go back and, they're like, well, we're not rewriting history, right? We're just recontextualizing it, right? We're examining it from like a new angle to highlight that you're rewriting history. You are just rewriting history. Get fucked. To further clarify the ways in which biosocial factors affected risks of mortality, our study is the first to combine osteological evidence for population affiliation with skeletal data on sex. I thought trans women were women, and thus you could not tell the difference between a male and a female skeleton. Someone needs to cancel this woman immediately, right? Someone phone up the trans, please, and like get them onto this. This is very, very problematic. Sex, age at death, and physiological stress in human remains excavated from a London 14th century plague burial ground. We test the hypothesis that people who would have been identified as belonging to population affiliations other than white European, and specifically connected to an African geographical affiliation, and who were therefore potentially racialized as black, capital B, in life. Oh my God, they're just reaching back. They're like, oh yes, even that categorization, which was like totally invented in like freaking what? When was BLM? Chat, when was BLM? 2020? Oh no, this thing that we like literally just made up, like, oh, we reach all the way back in the past. Fuck. They think fascism is bad. My God, look at the way they do this. Oh, Russell's my jimmies, I tell you, chat. Therefore were potentially racialized as black in life or suffered the stressors associated with anti-blackness, migration, and unfreedoms. Unfreedoms. This bitch be reading the Newspeak dictionary, right? Like 1984 is not supposed to be a language guide manual. Oh, you need a smack. You need a smacky on your body, Ms. Redfern. This is terrible, terrible scholarship. My God. I would not wipe my ass with a paper such as this. I might catch something. My God. My God, unfreedoms. At demise over a lifetime faced higher risk of death compared to white Europeans during the plague. This is a pre-modern example of current discussions concerning race and COVID-19. And there you have it. This is what it's all about. Pandemic, race war, history journal. Fuck me. There were other groups in pre-modern England's racialized landscape, including the Welsh, the Irish, the Jews, and the Muslims. Weren't a lot of Muslims around, right? I mean, and we called them Moors back then. Thank you. In future population discussions, we can examine the compounded harm via intersectionality of black Jews and black Muslims. I don't think there were a lot of black Jews in London around that time. Black Muslims, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they tended to just call anyone who was dark a Moor, right? Like, the Moors, like the Mohammedans, the Muzzies, right? But there was just sort of more like exotic back then because there were so few of them, right? Uh, intersectionality of black Jews and black Muslims. Although this cannot be confirmed for medieval English Jewish cemeteries because these human remains are reburied often immediately after excavation. Yeah, and also something tells me that if you asked like the London synagogue, right, hey, can we go into your Jewish cemetery and start like digging up corpses so we can tell like how many of them were like black, the Jews would be like, number one, this cemetery is holy. Get the fuck away from us. Number two, you just did an anti-Semitism. If you want to like keep your career, bugger off. But of course, because our sites were Christian burial grounds, they don't need to be reburied. Fuck them, right? Who cares about the Christians? They do not yield any evidence for black Muslims, although their presence may have been erased through being given a Christian burial treatment. My sister in Christ, these were mass graves. These were mass plague graves, right? I mean, the stupidity. It's too much. It's too much, chat. Nevertheless, one can consider the further compounded harm of intersectionality in relation to anti-blackness and ratio-religious structural racism in these cases in future examinations of Muslim grave sites. There are a lot of those in London around that time. A lot of Muslim cemeteries in mid 14th century London. Our article focuses on anti-black structural racism within Christian cemeteries, racial capitalism's earlier genealogies, and medieval London as a location to highlight how a substantial community can be erased from history. How do we know that they were erased from history? Well, we can't find them. Well, then how do you know they were there? Well, they have to be there, right? Don't you know this is a nation of immigrants? We was always here. We was Kangs. Okay, so what I want to know is how they measured the skulls, and then we'll close out. Oh my god, this is like, man, I remember I used to read a lot of this like stuff when I was at uni. I was really fascinated by this kind of like really bad scholarship, right? I used to like try and play a drinking game with people where like you try and think up like the stupidest title for like an academic paper. Couldn't get many people to like play it properly though. A discussion of decolonization and black feminist theoretical praxis often begins with an autoethnography. This has been advocated as a necessary component in an anti-racist, black feminist, and decolonized approach to historical bioarchaeology. But if you want a translation of that, right, basically it means like writing like race communist crap. You'll often like start a paper with like a personal note from the author who will be like, because I be black and because I be a woman, this be very important paper. You has to know that I be black. I just in case anyone who is reading it might mistake your authorship for someone who was not of color. We are keenly aware of the twinned whitenesses of both anthropology and medieval studies. This double whiteness based has also meant a lack of black, capital B, researchers and knowledge producers in our fields. Well, I see the knowledge you be producing and I'm not impressed, quite frankly. We hope to prioritize the methodologies of black feminist archaeology and the interdisciplinary work we bring to bear on this archive. In addition, following archaeologies of the heart, oh my God, we emphasize our commitment to position work consciously and to practice a rigorous self-reflexivity in its conduct. We believe our work is about generating multiple perspectives on truth. Fuck off. Especially how our interdisciplinary work crosses academic silos, enabling a pluralistic approach to a myriad of historical truths and methodological discoveries. Mate. I think I just got cancer from reading that. Chris, I studied international relations at university, mate. his guess is drama, gender studies, or fashion design. Oh, yeah, nearly. Um, Wait. So I wanna. Where did they measure the skulls? I wanna see the bit where they like measured the skulls. Oh my god, this is even worse than I thought. Likewise, medieval studies scholarship has boosted this pre-racial version of the pre-modern past that has allowed medieval cultures, societies, writers, and power brokers to hide behind, quote, white innocence, when the truth is that race, structural racism, was invented, refined, and rehearsed in medieval England. Oh, fuck out. Oh, bleh. Jeez. Oh, dude. Oh, this is just cancer. Oh my god. Um, Black feminist methodology. Dude, this is really horrible. Okay. Look, we're past the hour. I really want to. Where's the bit where they measure the skulls? Come on, they must have like what was the mechanism by which they determined who was black and who was not? Oh wow, look at this chat, right? They have a map showing the location of London within the United Kingdom. Not a map of where the cemeteries are within London, right? Which would actually be like interesting. But Control F for skull. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's see. No. They wouldn't use the word skull. Yes, it's too on the nose. Oh, here we go. Found it. Skeletal samples. The individuals in this study are curated by the Museum of London. The plague victims, 49 of them included in this study, were excavated from the Royal Mint site in the 1980s. So they didn't even do any actual archaeology, right? What they did, right, was they went to a collection of skeletons that the Museum of London already pre-excavated in the 1980s, right? And went to them and went like, I bet some of these be black females, right? And it was killed by racisms. Oh God, fucking hell. Okay, yep. So the first was East Smithfield Cemetery. Dates are supported by coins from a purse found during excavation. So they don't really know where these like skeletons are from. When these skeletons are from, honestly. Oh no, here we go. Here's an actual map. Ancient DNA analysis of skeletons excavated from the emergency burial ground has identified Y. pestis at both sites. Well, if you got DNA analysis, why didn't you just use DNA to determine which one of them was black? You all? Perhaps it wouldn't have given you the outcome that you wanted. I can't help but feel that if they like, okay, right. So how do they determine? Here we go. Right. The human remains were recorded using the Wellcome Osteological Research Database. Of these, 49 were included in our study. Okay. So no actual archaeology took place at all. This was purely a like sit on your butt and use other people's research. They had previously been selected for population affiliation analysis. Redfern and Hefner. Okay, right. So this is her second paper. I presume the first one was how many blacks skeletons be in the British Museum and how like how problematic this is, because they had the cranial vault and facial bones present that are used in the macromorphoscopic method. Chat, can someone look up the macromorphoscopic method? I have a feeling that or did they literally make this up? Hefner and Lind. Oh my God. Wait, okay, right. So if this whole way of like determining whether they're black or not was literally invented by the co-author of this paper. I'm gonna like laugh so freaking hard. Here we go. Here we go. It is literally measuring skulls. The MMS method uses 17 defined cranial traits, such as nasal bone contour, inferior nasal margin, and nasal aperture shape, assessed through visual and standardized scoring, supported by detailed definitions, line drawings, and software tools like the macromorphoscopics software for data collection and analysis. Okay, fucking when the communists get into like skull measurement. Oh my god. The modern constructed identities are often associated with race, such as white or black, are not biological realities, and the continuous and overlapping nature of human variation does not permit a rigid determination. Instead, any method only calculates probabilities of membership into some a priori established reference samples. To detach our estimates from the typological underpinnings of forensic anthropology, we utilize cranial data to estimate affinity, which Spradley and Jantz suggest is not attached to definitions of race and ethnicity, and does provide useful data for identification efforts and biodistance analysis. Fucking, my god. So anyway, there you have it. Happy Black History Month, everyone. And remember that, racism not only kills in the present, but also in the past. You're all. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I'll be back on next Monday. I'm not sure. I don't know. Every single time I start like researching stuff, I get like sucked off onto some side track. But there will be something cool next week. Thank you to everyone who super chatted, Mikey Pikey, and thank you very much, Aaron, for the $50 super chat. I really, really appreciate that, mate. I will see you all next week. Good night, everyone.